Very good. All right. I am going to call to order this virtual staff meeting of the Hamilton County Board of County Commissioners, June 16th, 2020. This is our second staff meeting since we've started back, so I'm very excited that we're having our staff meetings again. Just gives us an opportunity to dialogue in a different way. It's not quite so formal. So we've got 3 agenda items. The first one is a presentation by Kathy Schwab. She is the director over at LISC, and it deals with the countywide housing strategy. Liz Bloom, you're on for this too, aren't you?
I am indeed.
Yeah, okay. Yes. All right, very good. So I will recognize the two of you. And Kathy, I assume you're doing the presentation.
Well, we both are.
Oh, great.
Liz has spent a lot of time with the data, and data needs to be explained by a data person. So I just want to thank you for inviting me back, first of all, for having Liz and I present the highlights of what we're calling Housing Our Future. And the last time I spoke in front of you several months ago, pre-COVID, I gave you the sort of the background and the process we went through, so I'm not going to belabor that. And Liz, is this up on the screen?
I'm trying to, let me see here. There we go. Can you all see that?
Yes.
Yes.
There we go.
Okay, you need to be like a slide or so up, but I think what's important about the sort of the history of how we got here.
Hold on a minute. I'm sorry. I'm just trying to get myself organized here. If you don't, there we go. I'm sorry. There we go.
Perfect slide.
There we go.
So I think what's really important is to know that we did this in collaboration with so many housing providers in the region and a lot of stakeholders. You know, and as you all painfully know, the COVID crisis has really exacerbated the inequities and like our shortcomings in just being able to protect our most vulnerable residents. It is interesting that, like, when I look back at the values and the vision and the goals that we did, the vision really stresses that this really, we need to address equity in our community. We know that because it was confirmed in all of our qualitative data, it was confirmed in our quantitative data. And when we got to framing the strategy, our values really put people first and fostering diversity. So this was all pre-COVID. And we just know that in our goals, we actually narrowed this down to sort of the 3 Ps. To protect our most vulnerable residents, to preserve housing, affordable housing, and just our housing stock in general, and to produce units because we don't have enough units. So I'm going to let Liz kind of go through the numbers a bit, and then I'll finalize with what our next steps are.
Thank you.
So I know that you have all heard a lot about the need for affordable housing in Hamilton County, and so I'm not going to take a long time with this. We've identified a deficit of up to 40,000 units of affordable housing that we need, and we have seen over the 5-year period that housing costs have gone up, but incomes have not. And what that means is that we've seen in any given year, over 12,000 people are experiencing homelessness. We have a high eviction rate, higher than the state average. And I'm going to talk a little bit about building conditions because that's also part of this equation. 11% of units are in Hamilton County have lead paint hazards. And I know we can be a little wonky when we talk about affordable housing and the terms that we use, but I want to sit on this slide for just a minute and do some description. About a third of the housing, or about a third of the households in Hamilton County live in units, housing that they own or that they rent, which isn't affordable to them. What that means is they're forced to pay more than 30% of their income on their housing. What we all know in creating a household budget is that we want to have enough money for all of the things that we need. And when we spend over 30% of our housing, our income on housing, what we're called is cost burdened with housing, which means I don't have enough money for education. I don't have enough money to put in savings. I can't get my kids where they need to go. And so it's really important. We all need affordable housing. None of us should be paying over 30% of our income on housing. But what we know is that poor households in Hamilton County are over half of them are paying over 50% of their income on their housing in the city, and over 75% of poor households in the county are paying more than 50% of their income on housing. That could be either for renting or their home ownership, their mortgage. So it could be either of those things. So when people ask, and I hear people ask this question all the time, how in the world can we have an affordable housing project when we know that Hamilton County is such an affordable housing market? And it is affordable if you have money. If you don't have money, if you make less than the median income, it's not such a great deal. And what you see here is just a sense of, to rent a 2-bedroom apartment in Hamilton County, you need to make about $33,000 to live affordably. If you're a nurse, if you work at Amazon, if you work in a restaurant, if you're a customer service rep, if you work in a retail outlet, you don't make enough money to rent that apartment. If you're a registered nurse, you don't make enough money to get a mortgage on a house that is a median income house in this economy. So what that means is, as we are growing the economy, and we are growing the economy, we're growing it in low-wage jobs that put people at housing instability. And so I just wanted to sort of go there a little bit and hopefully demystify some of the jargon that we use all the time.
Can I interrupt you?
Yeah.
And back up to that last slide. I pulled my calculator out to try to do the math. But when you talk about, the 33,200 for affordable housing, break this down into monthly? Yeah, would you? What's a month? Because I think, forgive me, I think in terms of, what you pay on a monthly basis.
It's under $1,000.
Okay.
Right around $1,000, about $900. We did a lot of our calculations using the $900 mark is what we would call an affordable rental.
Okay.
And those are becoming harder and harder to find.
And another way of looking at that is what we call the rental wage, and that's $17 an hour to be able to afford that 2-bedroom that Liz just described, the average 2-bedroom.
Thank you.
And again, I sit there because I think that we have gotten in our heads, all of us, over the years, that this is an affordable housing market, and it is an affordable housing market, but not if you don't make enough money.
Right.
And it's becoming increasingly so. So what I want to tell you is that the copy identified, there are sort of 4 big pieces of the strategy. We have a conversation about we need to produce more housing. We need to preserve the existing housing that we have, which is affordable. We need to protect our vulnerable residents. And there are some systems at play here that make access to affordable housing even more difficult. So the document also identifies resources and new resources that need to be brought to bear. And then there are a set of very detailed recommendations that I think are a reflection. They're really become a roadmap. I think that what's going to have to happen here is there are a number of people, lots of housing advocates who are already working, who have put their best thinking into this document. And it really is going to serve as a roadmap as we go forward. I also want to say that Penn Praxis was a national consultant that worked with us on our team and really helped us identify national best practice where it existed. So Kathy identified the fact that we are in this, how many times can we say unprecedented times? But I think the short-term needs that get laid to bear at this point are we need to keep people in housing. That's the thing that needs to happen in the short term. And you have actually already stepped up in some pretty significant ways around this. You're sheltering homeless residents and you're providing rent and utility assistance to keep people in housing. I think that's the most important thing on a short-term basis, and you're there in a lot of ways. And I know the region really appreciates the way that you've stepped up in these 2 areas. The long-term strategy is nothing less than a more equitable housing market. which sounds like a big, huge thing to say, but I think that's where we have to go. This notion that we can't go back to normal, we've got to do better. Normal is not great for people without money in Cincinnati and Hamilton County around housing. And I'm going to give Janice Jones at home credit for this. Janice is telling us that we need to do much better than normal. And so, as I said, the recommendations are sort of packaged in 4 big pieces. We need to produce more affordable housing. I've identified earlier that the gap is about 40,000 units, and what this set of recommendations calls us to is about 20,000 units over a 10-year period. We hope that as wages come up, and we're going to suggest that we have to bring wages up, that people will be able to afford more housing in the market. Because we don't have to produce 40,000 units. We hope if we produce 20,000 units, that we'll be getting close to there. We're also talking about protecting our existing affordable housing stock. That means CMHA units. That means housing choice voucher units. That means the naturally occurring low-income housing in the market. So when I say preserve that market, it's a couple of things. It is certainly about making sure that we're reinvesting in our existing affordable housing stock, either public or private, and also strengthening our code network so that conditions get better in the stock that exists. And we currently have about 60,000 affordable units in the market, most of which are not public units, most of which are privately occurring units in the market. We also want to protect existing vulnerable renters and owners. What that means is there's a whole set of recommendations about what it means to keep people who want to stay in the neighborhoods they've lived in those neighborhoods when rents are going up and when market values are going up. That means protecting owners from tax increases. That means protecting vulnerable renters from eviction. There's a series of, and I have to say, in this area, I think we are very fortunate in Southwest Ohio to have a legal aid that is just best in class here doing this work. Also, Home in this region is a very strong partner and has been with us every step of the way. Then there are a set of recommendations about systems change. It's one thing to produce units, it's one thing to keep people in units, but we know that as long as wages are low, we're going to struggle to provide enough affordable housing. We need to think about more equitable zoning. And thank you to everybody who voted yes for the transit levy, because it makes so much difference in terms of what kinds of units are available to folks and how they can get from their house to their job. So in terms of production, there are a whole series of recommendations in each of these areas. I'm going to just highlight a few that I think are most county specific, and I'm happy to answer any kind of questions you have. I think it's in terms of production from a county standpoint, there are lots of suburban communities who are interested in this work and who want to do the right thing. And I think the extent to which we can find projects in suburban communities that are affordable and mixed income units, we got to support those projects. And it's Silverton, it's Coleraine Township, it's North College Hill. These projects exist, and there are folks working on these kind of projects right now. And they're in contact with Joy and folks in the county. They get good support from people. I also want to talk about building the capacity in building trades. All the production we're talking about is not public production. We want small developers and small business to be good property owners. And we need to make funding available to them. We need to make sure that they can access building trades so that they can produce units in the market that are naturally affordable. Preserving existing affordable stock is tremendously important. You saw the 60,000 number. We need more. We don't want to go backwards, right? We need to preserve that set of units. That's about home repairs and funding for low-income homeowners who need to make home repairs, also for small landlords who also need to make repairs, and strengthening the code enforcement network. What that means is that we need to make technology available to code enforcement folks. We need to make sure they have the most up-to-date resources. We need to make sure they're talking to each other. If there is a REIT that's causing problems in Coleraine Township, they're probably also causing problems in North College Hill. And we need to help those building code inspectors figure out how to deal with problem landlords.
Hey Liz, just let me add on the providing home repair funding. We talked a lot about the HIP program that Todd Fortune started over a decade, maybe a decade ago, and maybe revamping that program with the bank's help to be more effective, to like reach more homeowners, to be a longer term, because it's just not an effective program right now. It's just not well used, and it's only one bank. So that's just an example of existing programs out there.
Right, Kathy, that's a very good idea. And I think where the problem is that it is only one bank, and they started out with several.
I remember.
You know, and something else that I thought about, you know, if I look back to about this time last year, we were having discussions and there were protests about people being displaced by gentrification.
Right.
You know, and it just breaks my heart, you know, that people that want to stay in their communities, I'll even say that they're not adverse to the community being improved, but when the price of these units go up so high that they can no longer afford to stay there. So, you know, so I think that if we can address that when you talk about the systems.
Absolutely. And there are a number of recommendations targeted right there.
Good.
They're about low-income homeowners, and they're also about low-income renters.
Mm-hmm.
Partly it's about incentivizing folks to provide more affordable units, particularly in these neighborhoods where markets are going up. It's about making sure that that community organizations understand what they need to do to rezone in ways that provide more affordability, and that people have an early notification system when existing units are going out of subsidy, so that we can backstop those units. So there's all kinds of detailed recommendations in the document about supporting those owners and renters in neighborhoods that they want to stay in.
Good. I'm happy to hear that.
So I'm really hitting the tops of the sort of the highlights here. I think one of the things that's great about this document is that it works at a number of different levels, right? There's some very detailed recommendations that hopefully groups will use to start implementing, and then there's some systems ideas that we all need to understand.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Absolutely. So need exactly, Commissioner, what we were just talking about. There's a whole set of recommendations about protecting vulnerable homeowners and renters in neighborhoods where prices are going up, expanding homeownership opportunities and the equity that creates. So there has been often a debate about, are people who are low income ready for homeownership? I want to say, being a homeowner and being able to be a homeowner of an affordable unit that you can afford for 30% of your income makes a huge difference in a family's ability to generate wealth. And we really want to make sure that those avenues are open to folks. Again, I feel like I'm channeling Janice. She and I spend a lot of time together, but Janice will be very eloquent about the need to make sure that lending institutions and banks and other partners support homeowners in these neighborhoods, because it really is, at least at this point, one of the most important ways that families generate wealth going forward. We want to support existing efforts, and again, I'm going to give a shout out to Home and Legal Aid, who I think are just best in class in this area, and to incentivize and educate landlords to accept housing choice vouchers. Need more people in that program, and there are lots of renters who have vouchers who can't find units, which is a real heartbreak because they have the eligibility but they can't find a unit. So we really need, and CMHA is actively working to recruit landlords into the voucher program, and that would be really helpful. So, and then there are some big systems issues. I'm not going to talk a lot about public transportation because yay, it's passed, and that's a good thing. A significant amount of the city and the county are zoned for very low density single family uses. It's hard to produce affordable housing when there's nowhere to produce any kind of density. And I think, it's often, as we are having this conversation nationally and certainly locally about equity, and what does that mean in a housing market? It means don't oppose higher density housing in your neighborhood, accept it and put your hand out. We also have talked a lot about conducting outreach and education with community folks around why everybody needs affordable housing for their grandmother, for their kid, or somebody in the neighborhood who works in the store down the street. And so part of what makes these systems that create barriers to affordable housing difficult is that people push back hard. And we need to do education so that people understand why it's in everyone's best interest that everyone is housed affordably. And I've said it several times, so I'm not going to belabor the point, but we really need to challenge employers to be paying a living wage, because you could buy a lot more house or rent a lot more house in the community if you were getting a living wage. And so those are sort of the big picture areas where we have a set of detailed recommendations. As I said, I kind of hit the highlights here, and I'm going to ask Kathy now to talk in a lot more detail about the funding strategy that comes with this, and happy to answer questions.
So of the 37...
Can I interrupt real quick before we move on to funding? So to piggyback on what Commissioner Parks said, at one point there was an effort, and it was through the Port Authority and the Land Bank, to talk to folks at the state level regarding neighborhoods becoming higher value neighborhoods, but there are families that have lived there for generations, and making those continue to be affordable. Was there any policy change? I think Greater Ohio was working on this to somehow freeze the property taxes of those kind of homestead individuals as property values increase, so that they wouldn't be hit with that?
Yes, that is a recommendation in the document, and it mostly benefits homeowners, low-income homeowners, which there are many. Renters, I think, are harder, and I think there are also recommendations in the document about protecting renters, and that's about protecting income restricted, LIHTC, and housing choice voucher, a number of other things, and also encouraging communities to do more advocacy when they're doing their planning to increase density and those kinds of things, so that we've got a longer term sustainable, affordable piece of the market in most neighborhoods.
And if I can say something, through the Port Authority, I think it was, Todd chaired the position that when, for instance, let's talk about Evanston, when those homes were renovated and increased in value, that the legacy homeowners, those that had owned the property for generations, that their property taxes would not rise. Is that that kind of what you're talking about, Denise?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, that exactly what I meant. But I thought there was an attempt to get some legislation passed related to that, and I was just wondering if that has happened.
No, it has not yet.
Yeah, let's check.
Okay.
Okay.
It's still in the works, and Greater Ohio is working with it. And there have also been some other statewide, there's a statewide affordable housing network that have been sort of sharing their, some of this legislation that they've seen in other parts of the state. But it has not passed yet.
Okay, thank you.
But how's it going? What's it look like to you?
Well, it was full force before COVID hit. There's a lot of things that went on the back burner policy-wise after that happened. We have not had an update recently.
Okay.
So, we were just hoping that this document and of the dozens of strategies would help both the city, the county, funders, the health systems, everyone emerging from this crisis to make our communities a little more resilient and just for sort of the long term, and use this as a blueprint or a guide. the funding is different no matter what we do, no matter what policies we pass. If we don't have additional public-private resources, and we have public, and you're putting those to good use with your homelessness, with your eviction prevention. I mean, that's all awesome, and it's great, and it's so needed. But if we need a long-term affordable housing trust fund, I mean, the city passed it, but it's not funded enough. We need to have that, and we need to have private resources to be able to do things like mezzanine debt to make projects more affordable and to add more units to those projects. All we need is additional gap financing. We need more low interest acquisition and pre-development money, because then more projects would get started. We have to help incentivize those market rate developers to add 5%, 10% of their units as affordable. When I think of all the incentives that the city gives, if we could just tie that to some affordability, we'd have a lot more units. And we need to create some type of a revolving loan fund for repairs. There just isn't enough block grant money in either the city or the county to take care of this. And then, of course, the ongoing advocacy for new state and federal resources. You definitely took your federal resources and maximized those to address housing disparities and housing issues. And I really applaud that. But ongoing, we're going to need to lobby the federal and state and we're doing this already at the state, to sort of change and to redirect, because affordable housing is a problem in Columbus and Cuyahoga County and Toledo and rural. So you can go to the next slide. We're proposing building a fund with private resources, using like the city and the county's block grant as some of the gap financing that's needed, the grant money, if you will, bringing in private philanthropy. Greater Cincinnati Foundation wants to raise a lot of money for affordable housing. This is one of their big focuses. The health systems all want to know what to do. They've been actually waiting in the wings and to see what are the strategies that come out of this. Well, we've already hit them up with eviction, homelessness. These are going to be the two top, and we've given them groups like St. Vincent de Paul, Community Action Agency, and Bethany House, who does an amazing job of supporting families that are being evicted. It's one of the best. Talk about best in class. They're one of the best here, and I know you all support them. But the health systems can do that also, because that's where health really starts and ends, with being housed. The churches, we've had two large church foundations, if you will, at the table throughout this whole housing process. They want to know too what to do, and we've got two that are interested in taking some of their principal and their endowment and putting it into affordable housing, and that's more to come. That's one of the things I want to do in retirement. The banking community will come together with low interest debt. That's not a problem. That will feed into our pipeline, but we need some of our deep pocket corporate citizens to recognize this as a true challenge for our community. And we need to leverage all this public or private with the public dollars, and how it's being done in cities all over the country. So I may come back and ask you for some of your block grant dollars. And that's part of the partnership with the county. I'd love to encourage a county-city partnership around block grant dollars. We may need to wait a while for that, but it's truly the best way to leverage all of your federal dollars around such an issue that is huge for both the city and the county. And then Liz, next slide.
Can I just interrupt for 1 second?
Sure.
And the other thing that I think we haven't done a good enough job, if these resources can be brought to bear, if we can be producing 2,000 units a year for 10 years, this is an economic development strategy. These are huge investments in the communities that we care about. And I think that makes a big deal too. It feels like this is money that we are sort of giving to charity, but I want to say it's really an investment in the communities in the future.
And then these are all the funders that paid for this. They all felt that it was so important. They put their money where their mouth was, and I just have to give a great shout out to Greater Cincinnati Foundation. They led, them and Bethesda Inc. are why we're doing this. Because they came to us and said, we will support this. And then here's a link to the complete guide that has the 100 or so recommendations, but the summary, which is about a 25-page document, really goes through the top 30 or so strategies, recommendations. So in your spare time, if you have time to read it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you both. Super important. All three of us have said we want to try to do more by way of housing throughout the county. So thank you for the presentation. Are there any questions or comments from the commissioners?
Yeah, thank you, Madam President. I have a couple of comments and questions. You had mentioned at the beginning that the evictions here in our area are the highest in Ohio. Do you have any ideas or restrictions on our policies, our procedures too strict, or why do you think our evictions are so high?
You know, I wish I knew that. Ohio in general is number 10 in the country, and Hamilton County has led the state for 2 years. Before that, it was Columbus. So I don't know exactly whether it's the fact that we have an abundance of rental properties.
Kathy, I think that's at least part of it. There are more rental properties in this region than in most other parts of the state.
Okay.
That's at least part of it.
That would make sense why it would be so high then. Not that we like it, of course not. But in addition, you mentioned about CMHA. I know they have really been moving forward, as you say,
Yes.
to help with affordable housing. Affordable housing is number one on my list almost as far as areas that I'm concerned about. They also donated about 15 to 20 vouchers just recently to victims of domestic violence that had to get away. They didn't have any place to stay. So, and I just wanted to comment that your partnerships that you have in the community are just phenomenal. And so that's what makes everything work, because of your relationship with all those people. And then I guess lastly, your report was just awesome, very clear and straightforward, and gave me a lot to think about. So I appreciate such a comprehensive report. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Parks?
Yes, ladies, thank you so much for your report. And I would really be interested into looking into expanding the HIP program. So if there's any way that that I might be able to assist you, I'd be happy.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. You know, here we are. I just was asked earlier today about our budget. Not great, because our revenues are down. But, you know, it's just a hard time. However, that said, we will not always be in this time.
Right.
So when you talk about a housing trust fund, I don't have an understanding of what a meaningful amount of money, maybe in partnership with the city going into such a fund, you know, what is a meaningful amount?
Well, it depends on what you're going to tackle, but housing trust funds are about 185 of them around the country. Columbus has one that is funded with, I'm pretty sure it's bed tax from the hotels, and they just increased it. It's roughly 10 million a year. They range anywhere from 10 million to 50 million, depending on the need in the community.
So the 10 million is that in part the county's contribution, or is that the total county contribution?
No, that comes directly from bed tax in Franklin County.
Okay.
But it's not enough, clearly, because the mayor just issued in Columbus did a bond issue for 50 million to put into affordable housing, trying to get the banks to match that. So, I mean, they're trying a lot of different tactics. The Housing Trust Fund is sort of a permanently funded, ongoing support for more units. And it's funded with a variety of, you know, we tried the 108 fund for the city, but that's pretty maxed out. So, and our bed tax is certainly maxed out. It's just, we don't have a good resource that I could advocate for at the moment. And then, of course, we have the opponents of taxes, and right now is probably the worst time to consider that. I'm happy to get the bus tax. I'm happy to have transportation. That'll make a huge difference. So you have to be happy for small wins. So I'm going after sort of the private sector. And, maybe, and I'll give you one example of how a community or how public dollars helped. In Detroit, now they have a lot more block grant money than either you or the city have, but they dedicated $5 million a year out of their block grant money into a fund that was a $250 million fund in the city of Detroit. So it was just a way of building a fund that has layers of funding that make doing more projects realistic.
Okay. So did you say that the city at this moment in time is not putting into a housing trust fund?
They've passed the VTICA tax, so for the neighborhoods, a little bit of that. Then there's I call the Airbnb tax, short-term rental tax. Mm-hmm. It's generating about, last I heard, about $1 million a year. And right now it's been shut down literally for the last 3 or 4 months. So
right.
It just doesn't have enough money in it to really do anything significant. Although the money that's there could be used for eviction prevention, homelessness, the things that we really do need a short-term solution for.
And that's my final question. So the housing trust fund then could be used for eviction or more short-term, which, as you noted, we're trying to do some of that right now. But it's the more long-term that I'm interested in, and what does a long-term spend look like from the housing trust fund? If the dollars are being used for eviction and foreclosure relief and that kind of thing, what's the long-term strategy?
So with the city, there's just not enough money in there in the fund currently to do big projects. We would envision, it would be great if we had a city-county one housing trust fund that was funded with a county-wide tax source, whatever that may be. And I believe the housing strategy has a list, at least a number of them, ideas from around the country. And then that fund would be decided, you'll put X amount of dollars towards this and build X amount of units per year. That would be the goal of the fund. And if you bring in private dollars, in addition, that just doubles or triples the amount of units you can do.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Thank you. Very helpful. Are there any questions or comments other than what has already been offered?
I have nothing.
Okay. All right.
My questions have been answered. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Well, ladies, we need to circle back after the pandemic and after we have a better understanding of what our financial situation is towards the end of the year, moving into next year. Because I think, as you can hear, all three of us are committed to trying to do something in this space and are looking for a way to, from my perspective, do more of that long-term thinking as we start to tackle some of the eviction stuff. So thanks for that. And maybe we'll regroup maybe in the beginning of next year just to touch base on what's going on.
That's great. I'm going to do one more call out before we leave this, is to say thanks to Joy Pearson. Mm-hmm. She was great all the way through this. We had great support from you all through Joy, and we greatly appreciate that.
Is Joy on the call?
Her father died this week.
Okay.
Emily is being Joy.
Okay. All right. And Emily, yes, thank you. All right. Well, so before you two go, I'm going to offer one more thing. So in front of me, and I regret that we're not in person, but in front of me is a resolution honoring Kathy Schwab for her 11 years of service to LESC. And so, Kathy, it's not on fancy paper yet, but we'll get there. So I just want to look. You have been such a valued partner in this community. You have been dogged about this issue. I know it's one of your top priorities, and I don't think any of this happens without you, and including all the partners, of course. But you need to have a driver, and you are the driver, and have been. So I'm going to read just a couple of these whereas clauses. This has been signed or affixed by all three of us. So it says, whereas Kathy has always demonstrated the drive and the passion of her convictions as she has been translating that passion into action for 4 decades in this community to create lasting change. And whereas Kathy has been so effective because she is a part of this community, she works so hard because she cares about the residents of Hamilton County. Kathy is a lifelong Cincinnatian. Her children grew up here, and she has always been about making this community a better place. And so now, therefore, be it proclaimed that the Board of County Commissioners of Hamilton County does hereby recognize and thank Kathy Schwab for her outstanding career of dedicated service to the citizens of Hamilton County and our region, and wishes her well in all of her future endeavors. And it is adopted, and we are declaring the day Kathy Schwab Day in all of Hamilton County. So there you go.
Thank you. That is so sweet.
Yeah, we'll get this out to you.
It's not quite like a dance retirement party that I had planned, but that is so sweet. Thank you all very much, Lady Commissioners.
Yes, thank you all for what you're doing. And Liz, I don't mean to mean you out, but you're not retiring, so. All right, thank you guys, and we'll circle back with you. Oh, I'm sorry, we have to vote on it. Oh my. All right, so that it is a resolution. We all have seen it. So I am going to move that we approve of the resolution honoring Kathy Schwab.
Second.
Commissioner Dreehouse?
Yes.
Commissioner Summer Dumas?
Yes.
Commissioner Parks?
Yes.
Oh, the technicalities. All right, very good. Thank you. Thank you all. All right. We'll move on to our next agenda item. This is the recommendations from the Community Development Advisory CDBG Nonprofit Services. So Emily, are you going to lead this?
I think Holly's going to do an intro and then I'll go over the recommendations.
Okay, thank you. Holly.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Commissioner. And thanks, Emily. As you saw on the agenda and as you received a little bit of information prior to the meeting, we're happy to be here today to present the recommendations for the Community Development Block Grant Funds for nonprofits. You may recall that we are using 2 pots of money for this allocation. We're using our 2020 allocation for CDBG dollars for nonprofits in the amount of $700,000 and $500,000 of our allocation from the additional CDBG dollars we received through the CARES Act. So in total, we have $1.2 million available for nonprofit services this year. And just as a kind of set the stage of how this process works, this is my first time going through this, so I appreciate Joy and James and Emily's patience with me. Community development does solicit for the nonprofit services through a request for proposals, and that went out in late April. From there, the Community Development Advisory Council or Committee, which is a group of about 11 people, then meet, they review the proposals, and they make the recommendations for funding. And that's what we're here to present to you today. I think while Emily will go into more detail, from my understanding, CDAC, or the advisory committee, felt that essential services are now more essential than ever, given the pandemic. And I think you'll see that reflected in their recommendations. So with that, I'm happy to answer questions, but I would love to turn it over to Emily Carnahan. But before that, I have to thank James Noyes, who's the Director of Planning and Development, and also, of course, Joy Pearson, Emily, and Boubacar Diallo with Community Development. They are just a joy to work with, and they know how to get out money quickly and the most efficient way. So with that, Emily, if you're there, I'll turn it over to you if there are no questions.
Thanks, Holly. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Just a second and I will share my screen. Hopefully, I might have to log back in, sorry. Okay. All right, can everyone see the summary? Okay, great. So as Holly mentioned, we have $1.2 million for this round of nonprofit services funding. We received a total of 16 applications for over $1.8 million. And the committee typically meets twice, but they actually met 3 times to review all of these applications thoroughly and make the best recommendations they felt that they could. So I'll just sort of go down the line and explain some of these. As you can see, the first several are really the essential services that the committee felt during this time was more important than ever. Restore Food Bank, these are for all of their pantry items. So they're providing emergency sustenance in Hamilton County. They will help around 29,000 households and provide almost 5 million pounds of food over the next 12 months. They typically, in the past few years that they've been funded, have done primarily a produce initiative trying to increase fresh produce, but with the pandemic and the increased need, they have increased their request to include all of the pantry items. And you can see the recommended amount from the committee is for $300,000. The next 2 are through the Legal Aid Society. The first one is foreclosure prevention and emergency mortgage assistance. So that request is for $115,000, and 150 households will receive counseling, and at least 25 households will receive direct assistance. You can see that's based on the maximum amount per household. So if a few households, don't need that full amount, then obviously they'll be able to help more. The second Legal Aid Society is in partnership with the Community Action Agency to provide rental assistance and eviction prevention. So that request is for $225,000. 150 households will receive the legal assistance, and then in addition, also 105 households will also receive that direct rental assistance. The next one is St. Vincent de Paul for their charitable pharmacy services. 340 households, unduplicated households, will receive prescriptions and health screenings, and that request is for $238,000. Lydia's House has requested for their housing and support services for families in crisis and extreme poverty. This is for mostly mothers with small children or pregnant mothers. They will help 100 clients, which includes the mother and the children, so approximately 40 households, and they receive a variety of transitional and support services, and that request is for $70,000. Pro Seniors, this is the rest of these for Pro Seniors down are all new organizations for this year that were not funded last year. So Pro Seniors has applied for their Senior Legal Services Program for $50,000. They say that 500 clients will receive legal assistance for resolving issues to receive and retain benefits that enhance health, independence, financial security, and quality of life. So this is all sorts of the things for basically letting seniors know what benefits they're eligible for, and then helping them navigate online systems or legal issues to be able to get and retain those benefits. Mortar and their Thriving Entrepreneurs Program is recommended at $75,000. This will help 30 clients receive a 15-week entrepreneurship training. And I will say, you can see the little asterisk for Mortar and Dress for Success. The recommendation is cut. So those deliverables are based on a prorated amount. So we will work with the organization based on their final award amount to make sure that they can deliver what we think they can deliver. Icon Corporation is in their supported employment and job readiness services. 210 clients will receive job training, support, and placement. And that request is for $60,000. and is Dress for Success in their career transformation center. Approximately 131 female clients will receive career guidance, technology skills, and job search support, and that recommended funded amount is $67,000. Does anyone have any questions so far?
Not so far.
I do.
Okay.
Can you talk to me about this ICRC
Yeah.
corporation?
Yeah. So ICRC is they do a whole host of things. So it's also sort of, let's see, they titled it Improving Quality of Life Through Economic Development and Wraparound Services. So they do everything. They do like counseling, like emotional counseling. They do different supportive things. And then the part that we will be most involved with is actual job training and job.
Excuse me, Emily, are they a nonprofit or a corporation?
They are a nonprofit. I'm not sure why their name's that. They are all nonprofits, yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Good
All
question.
right. Yeah, I'm good. Thanks.
Okay. Okay. So I will move on then. So a few of the ones that also applied that are not being recommended for funding are Cincinnati Works for an Employment Retention and Advancement program, the Children's Home for their Spark virtual home visitation for preschoolers.
Emily,
Yes.
do you have that on the screen also?
I do not.
Okay, that's okay. That's okay.
I can provide it afterwards. I apologize.
Thank you.
Junior achievement of OKI partners in their financial literacy and career readiness program, working in neighborhoods for their financial capability program, and Unbelievable for their Pay What You Can food truck. So that is 14 applications, and we did have 2 that were deemed ineligible due to different criteria. So living arrangements for the developmentally disabled LAD and the Community Action Agency, their project lift. So these are the recommendations on the screen from the Community Development Advisory Committee. They also made contingency plans since in the past, sometimes we have several new organizations that are being recommended awarded awards. So if something happens, they are going to be unable to provide that service or something falls through, the CDEC has made a contingency plan recommendation to fund Cincinnati Works' Employment Retention and Advancement Program.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So working in neighborhood was refused. They
Yeah.
were.
So we actually, one of the main reasons is that they actually were awarded funding in 2018 through this program and still have funding from that year that they're still working through.
Okay.
So I also have a couple things. So one is the contingency plan with Cincinnati Works. Funding them in the amount of $75,000 is over what they requested. So I would think that's probably a typo. So I reduced that to 70, which is the request, unless there was a different reason for that.
It's actually, it's a typo. I apologize.
Okay. Just bringing that to your attention.
Thank you.
But that's on mortar, Denise.
Yeah, I'm going to ask about mortar too. Yeah, so mortar, I don't know, do you have the next column, which we all have on paper, or rather we got it via email. So you've got the amount that was recommended. So we don't have the requested amount on there. And so the one that requested, well, 2 actually, requested more than the recommended amount, and mortar is one of them.
Yes.
So mortar requested 150,000. They were given 75,000. I know they're new to the program, and I also I did ask about this of Holly when she was in my office a couple days ago. So I understand the idea that some of these Free Store Food Bank, Legal Aid with eviction, St. Vincent de Paul are all immediate needs. I get it. People are struggling right now, and we're trying to kind of stabilize. However, I would argue that mortar, because of the kind of work they do in the African American community, they also provide some stability, and they provide the ability for the folks they serve to generate wealth, which is something I think that we're hearing right now. As we listen to the community, as we listen to folks on the streets, there is a great deal of concern about us not investing in building wealth in especially the African American community. And so that's exactly what Mortar does. And so I was going to make a suggestion that we fund that a little bit higher, and make a reduction elsewhere just to bump that up a little bit, because I personally feel as though of all of these, that is hitting a mark of something that we're hearing as a community concern right now. So I don't know. I have not talked to either of my colleagues about this, but I'm hoping that we can bump that up a little bit.
I totally agree with you, Madam President.
Madam President, I had the very same concern.
Okay.
Because, you know, a part of our agenda is for economic development. And really, I'd like to learn a bit more about iCrime.
Okay.
You know, so I'll look into that.
Okay. So the idea then, and the other one, just for the record, Dress for Success asked for 75,000, got 67. So we got pretty close with those guys. So I'm less concerned there. I would wonder if the administration, if we were to bump up Mortar, say to at least 100,000,
Right.
you know, so that's a 25 reduction somewhere. I don't know, and I would leave it to the administration to figure out what that 25 would come from. Maybe from, not that I don't love the Free Store Food Bank, but they do get a lot of money here, and they also have the capacity to raise it. And so I wonder if that's a reasonable place to go. But I would leave it to the administration who's worked on this and knows the details to try to figure out what that equation looks like. Are there any questions or comments regarding that or any of the other items on here?
Madam President, I did hear, Emily, that the LIFT program was not approved, and you don't have to say anything now, but I'd like to know what the criteria they did not meet, because they really do great work in the community, and so all of them do. And so I was really impressed by the diversity of your selections also. But I just would like to know more about LIFT, if you could.
I will provide that for you. And the CDEC also was very pleased that we had quite a variety of applicants this time. And we're very glad to see them.
Yeah. That's all I have.
All right.
I will voice my agreement for both of those statements. And if you can give me more information on iCrime,
I will. Thank you.
I'll look into it.
So what is our timing here?
Madam President, I think this has to be approved next week at our at the board meeting next week. Holly, Emily, is that correct?
We don't.
It'll be at the next board meeting.
At the next board meeting.
So not this Thursday, but the one probably at the end of the month or.
All right. So we've got a couple of weeks.
Yeah, and I would say also that, and I appreciate Madam President, asking if we could come up with an approach here. You know, if the board's desire is to increase one of the grantees, as you're aware, the visual in front of you also shows various deliverables and metrics, and I think we would want to make sure that if we're reducing one and increasing another, that we're doing our best to hold the metrics steady, and that we don't dramatically reduce the metrics out of one. So we'll work with community development and figure out the best way to do that. I don't know whether it's if it's shifting this around, if there's other dollars that we could potentially pull from, but we'll come back to the board with a recommendation on how to accommodate that goal.
Okay.
I would just like to make a comment that would really like to keep Free Store Food Bank where they are. Looking at Legal Aid Society with 2 allocations, and lots of money is going toward evictions and rental assistance from other people, other agencies. And so maybe that second Legal Aid Society, maybe 200,000 there, because I agree, that Mortar should have about 100,000. So of course, we'll trust administration to do what they think is best to meet that matrix you were talking about.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I tell you what, if, and I neglected to thank the CDAC committee. There are a number of members on the committee. They have a great deal of knowledge related to nonprofits, to the work they do, and to local governments. So I'm very grateful for the work that they did. It certainly gives us a very good starting point here to pass on these recommendations. So just a little bit of tweaking, I think, going on here at the meeting. So
Right.
if Holly, yourself, or Emily or Joy can go back and revisit this, given what we've said, check in maybe with CDAC, make sure we're all on the right track here, adjust the metrics according to the funding. But if you could get something to us, we don't meet for 2 weeks now. But in the interim, if you could give us something so that we can ask questions maybe next week of a document and be ready to vote the following week. How about that? Or let me ask you this, maybe could we bring this back to our staff meeting in 2 weeks just for kind of an explanation as to the adjustments, and then be ready to go on Thursday, but get something to us next week if you can. How about that? That makes sense, commissioners?
Yes, that's fine with me.
That's
All right.
to me. Mhm.
Okay, let's do that. All right, very good. Anything else, Emily or Holly? We good?
Great job.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And please convey our thanks to the CDAC committee.
Definitely.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
All right. Thank you, thank you. All right, lastly, HCDC is on the line. Harry Blanton is with us. Harry, I assume you have a presentation.
We do. I think Pat is going to start off. Pat is up in my left-hand corner, but him and Catherine.
Yep.
Pat, you want to start?
Yes, I'll start. Can you hear us?
Yes, we've got
Okay, great.
Pat Longo and Catherine
And
Fitzgerald.
Catherine Fitzgerald is with me as well.
Yep.
And I'll start by if we can put our support behind Mortar. Mortar is one of our partners in the Minority Business Collaborative that helps pre-start to over $1 million in revenue companies in Hamilton County, and these are companies of all kinds, all sorts. So it's not just technology, but it's also retail stores, contractors, solopreneurs. And why I say that is because we've seen a lot of those over the probably last 30 days with the grant program, the Small Business Relief Grant Program. But very excited, and if there's ways that Mortar can be supported, I've been a contributor, a donor to them for probably the last 5 years individually. So I totally, not only do I speak it, but I also support it from that standpoint. But I want to thank the commissioners, Commissioner Driehaus, Commissioner Sumero-Dumas, and Commissioner Parks for the opportunity today. And also want to thank Jeff Aludo and Holly Chrisman for all they've done for us over the last, many years, but particularly over the last probably 90 days, because there's been a lot of things that have happened. If you all recall, March 16th was the day that I think a lot of folks started working from home. So we are on our 3-month anniversary of a lot of that activity. New initials, EIDL, PPP, SBA, all of these things have come to mean a lot to our community and our county. And HCDC spent a lot of time promoting, educating, connecting, coaching, and in a lot of aspects doing the good work of these big programs. And I think it's very, very important that we know that more work will be done, and we will continue to do the good things. And I know Harry's going to give us some statistics on some of the things with the Small Business Relief Grant Program. Some of the things that I'm already proud of is that over 600 hours of our team have gone into preparing and reviewing the various applications and the program. But I think what's even more important is the number of touches that have happened with the businesses in Hamilton County. I would say probably at least over half of the applications have needed some sort of either email or phone call. And I know our team has done that. I myself have already done probably 30 to 35 of the applications and have gotten to meet probably half of these businesses and get to hear their stories. So it's kind of neat to be able to see that. Other things that are going on besides that program, in our incubator, there's an organization out of Columbus called ECDI, and they work with underserved and women entrepreneurs and business owners. They are going to be coming and being part of our hub here on Menor Avenue in Norwood. We're excited about that because I think it adds the value of more coaches and also the value of a micro-lending program that serves, Hamilton County and Southwest Ohio, something that's sorely needed and I think is great. And one of the reasons why is because we will flat out tell you that small businesses are struggling. We have been trying to advocate for them, for people to buy local and continue to do that. Just an example, in our incubator alone here on Menor Avenue, probably 1/3 of the businesses are coming into the office. So we're just not seeing the activity, and there's a lot of hesitancy out there. On our lending side, our SBA lending products are seeing very nice activity in a number of fronts, whether it be manufacturing, whether it be retail. We're taking a look at a couple of restaurants. There's a lot of activity on our SBA side. And then for, what Catherine and Harry are going to talk about, I think the key thing is us upping our visibility, whether it's, just number of touches in the communities and to the number of businesses that have just needed assistance. A lot of hand holding. There's a lot of questions out there, with strategy and access to capital and paying bills. Those are things that all of our folks are really taking time and spending time with these businesses. Couple of highlights that I think, or at least one highlight, our OIC program, the Office of Innovation and Creativity, has seen some success. We've got one of our current clients, recently was announced last week, from, I believe, from the state of Ohio, that they're going to receive some tax credits because they're going to add over 100 employees over the next 3 years, and that's Helium SEO, and that's up in Blue Ash. And I'm going to brag a little bit. About 4 years ago, they went through our morning mentoring program. They also were coached by our team here at the Business Center. So we see that a company that started out with 3 individuals is now going to be probably somewhere in the mid 3 figures for employment. So we're pretty excited about stuff like that. I know you'd like to hear stories like that. So there is. It's not all gloom and doom, but there is. There's glitter of hope on the side of these clouds out there. So, and what I wanted to do was pass it off to Catherine Fitzgerald so she can take up the next part of the conversation.
Sure. Good afternoon, Commissioners. So in addition to the Small Business Grant Program, which has really taken the largest chunk of our time, a couple of other things we just wanted to highlight. We've had a relationship with Uptown Consortium for over 10 years. Bob Pickford is one of our business coaches who works with Uptown clients, and he's worked very closely to secure things like the EIDL and the PPP, as well as unemployment insurance benefits for Uptown businesses. He also participated in a video chat that Uptown Consortium held in conjunction with ECDI and LFRI, which was basically a question and answer on resources available for businesses impacted by COVID-19. Something else that we assisted with, Columbia Township is a participant in the Greater Cincinnati CIC, managed by HCDC. They very quickly, when COVID-19 was a pandemic, they very quickly wanted to do grants for restaurants impacted in the township. So through the Greater Cincinnati CIC, they issued 10 grants for $4,000 each. Those were dispersed April 8th. So as you can see, that happened quite quickly. And then just a real quick highlight on a project that we've been working on with the Village of Laughlin for years, which is the former Stearns & Foster site, which is now called The Locks, a 12-acre site in the Village of Laughlin. With our assistance with an RFP, they did select Nair Properties as the preferred developer That has been moving along even during the pandemic, with the goal of landing an advanced manufacturer, really to maximize jobs and earnings tax for the village. And more recently, Kukla Capital Partners purchased the Stearns & Foster office building, which is across the street, a 19,000 square foot office building. So that was also something the village was very pleased with.
Any questions, commissioners? Okay, I'll move on to this is Harry Blanton. Talk about the Office of Innovation. As Pat mentioned, one of our recent graduates, Helium SEO, had a nice story of creating 120 jobs. Also wanted to highlight Calibrity. We're not going to go through this whole article, but if you have time to read it, it's really interesting. They worked very closely with Kroger to help Kroger's little clinics handle all the technology involved with doing the COVID-19 testing of people. They were kind of ahead of the curve in terms of getting out there and having testing done. And Calibrity is a technology-oriented company that went through our Office of Innovation that was very instrumental in helping Kroger through that. So there's a lot of detail in the article, but we wanted to point them out. As you know, the Office of Innovation has a cohort of 10 companies each class, and we just finished our second class of 10 companies. I just wanted to point out that of those 10, 4 of the 10 were either minority or women-owned businesses, which was really important this time because in our first class, we didn't quite see the diversity that we wanted to see. So we worked very closely with the African American Chamber, the Hillman Accelerator, Mortar, et cetera, to try to get some more diversity in our class. So we're happy that 4 out of the 10 are either a minority or women-owned business. As Pat mentioned, a lot of these companies are struggling right now with the economy and having to be shut down for so long. So one of the things that the OIC did was to have some webinars and some experts in how to create sales and how to grow sales. And they tried to tailor it towards today's reality with COVID-19. So they did like 3 webinars over the last couple of months targeted at these smaller companies. And those are open not only just to the people who are in the OIC class, but it's open to all businesses to participate. So I know that they had about 40 or 50 people in one of the webinars. So they were happy with the ability to help those companies through this difficult time. Without going over the rest of the report, I thought the most important thing that you would want to hear about is the small business grant program that we're working on. It's been going on over the last couple of weeks. As I think you heard in an earlier report, there are about 450 companies that were accepted into the program after the first round of questions. We have now approved over 200 businesses for these grants. We just today started working on the grant agreements in terms of creating an agreement for each grantee to sign. And then once they sign that, we'll be able to get them the grant money. I think we mentioned in one of the previous meetings that over 96% of these businesses are either 10 employees or less. So one of the initiatives that was really important to us and part of our directive was to target this towards those small businesses that are missing out on the other federal programs like the PPP or the disaster loans. So we're really happy to say that 96% of these companies were 10 employees or less. About a little over 50% were minority-owned businesses, and 48% were women-owned businesses. So we did a good job of targeting it and helping those really small businesses. I do want to thank our partners. That includes a large group of people. So bear with me as I point out the community development was very helpful, as mentioned earlier. Emily Carnahan especially was very helpful. Joy and her folks. David Edenfield was a great technology expert. Robert Bell helped us a lot. Holly, of course, with her leadership was excellent. Bridget Doherty was very helpful. We also have been working with Plant Moran, the accountants, for their guidance. And then at the beginning of the whole program, we reached out to the Chamber, the African American Chamber, Ready Cincinnati, the Greater Cincinnati Micro Enterprise Initiative with Willie Hill, SCORE, and Urban League. And all of those groups either helped us design the program or they provided services to business who might have had difficulty in either getting access to computers or just uploading documents and just needing some technology help. So we want to thank all of our partners who helped us with this, and we're happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you, Harry. Yes, thank you and all of you for the annual report. But you are correct to say that I particularly am most interested in this last piece because we've been trying to track it and do exactly what you say. Try to help those that didn't get the PPP from the federal government but are still struggling to stay open or reopen. So it sounds like we hit the target. And I'm delighted to hear it. So have any of the businesses yet received the money? Or are you in that final stage where they're signing grants and then they get the money?
Yeah, we're still actually going through the approval process on the grantees through the applications. We're probably in the last few days of that, but we did dump out the ones who would have been approved at this point, and that's the 200 or there was 194. There's 209 that have been approved, but we dumped out 194. We are writing their agreements as we speak. One of our staff members is currently filling in the template for each of these grantees. And then we will be emailing that to them to try to speed it up. And then they can email back the application to us. And once we receive that signed agreement, we can do an ACH transfer to their bank account. So we don't even have to deal with checks. We can just do a direct deposit through our ACH process. And so we're trying to speed up getting the money to them as quickly as possible.
Yeah. And thank you so much for doing that. I mean, Holly and Bridget and all the others that you mentioned, I know this has been a huge lift, but I think it's really important. So thank you so much. HCDC has been an integral part of all of this, trying to make this program work. So thanks so much for all that you've done. And I assume that at the end, after all of it's been vetted, you can provide us with, the actuals, how many businesses, what is the demographic of the businesses and all that kind of stuff.
Sure. Yeah, we'll definitely do that.
Okay, great. It will inform another round if we do another round. So we're really grateful. Commissioners, any comments or questions?
Thank you, Madam President. I was wondering, Harry, the 50% minority, what minorities are those?
Unfortunately, Commissioner, when we set up this program, there was a possibility that it was going to be community development block grant money. And so those questions were inserted to answer the questions that CDBG asked, but it didn't differentiate between minorities. It just said, are you a minority business? So they would check that box. So we only know that they are a minority business or a women-owned business. We also asked if they were a veteran-owned business.
Maybe we can tweak that for our second round if we have a second round, because the question is being asked. Minority, okay. Quite a few things. So, okay. In addition, I don't know if it was you or Pat that talked about the webinars that you guys had, and so many people were involved in those webinars. I'm just wondering, I guess in administration, if we can put the announcement of those webinars on our site, because it sounds like they were really impactful. So maybe we can, you guys let us know and we can add them on our website.
Sure, we'll work with Bridget on that.
Okay, great. I had a word that was used earlier. I think Pat started it out with solopreneurs. Now, are they saying, is that the way you said instead of sole proprietor?
Well, solopreneur is the new term for the individual entrepreneur.
Okay,
so
that's good to know. Okay, thank you.
And I would say that probably half of the applications that I received, that I personally reviewed, were solopreneurs, single person entrepreneurs, and amazing. But I think what's really cool for us, and I know you like stories, is just there was a lady from College Hill who is a taxi driver, and obviously you know what's happened with the airport, and you know what's going on. I worked on that. Can't reveal her name, but she's going to get some funds because she did well with her application. There are contractors out there. There are restaurants in Anderson and also out in Cleves, that need, and also in the urban core. it's just fun to be able to chat with those folks. And I think Harry probably said it. These are the kinds of folks that probably when the PPP came out and the complexity of the PPP,
right.
You know, this wasn't, I won't say this was the easiest process, but it was a lot easier than the PPP. I think we did it. I think when we all said and done, we'll figure out we did a good job. There's probably some tweaking for our next round, and we can do some learning.
Okay. Well, thank you for educating me on the new lingo, Mr. Longo.
Oh boy.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I have.
Commissioner Parks?
Yes, I'd like to salute the entire team. The work done here is just incredible. I know that we went around and around because we wanted to get this right. And so with the administrative team and Harry and everybody involved, thank you so much for your hard work. And, you know, with our lessons learned, you know, we have now valuable information where we can go forward. And so I salute you and I thank you. And I also declare victory. I think that we did a great job with this. This was, I think that the brain trust went into the 15.
And Madam President, I'd just like to say, I know when we talked about the amount that we allocated for HCDC to do this work, I had some reservations, but I'm really happy about how things have come out, and also to hear the story of what you've done and gone beyond what was even expected. So money well spent. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hey, Harry, can I ask one additional question? So as you're doing the agreements, what is the typical loan request?
So of the 194, I think it's $1.7 million. So whatever the math is, I haven't been able to calculate it yet, but it's probably either 5 or 10, but there are some that just ask for $2,500 as well. People just realize that they're going to have to document the expenses, so they don't want to over ask. So most of them have been very targeted and specific about what they need. And then there's always the ones that ask for $10,000 that you kind of are looking at it like, do you really need this $10,000? but most of them I'd say between 5 and 10. It's
okay.
So $1.7 million divided by 194, so that would be probably a little less, like maybe 8,000 average or something like that.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, Harry, you're about right. It's about $8,300.
Okay.
Madam President.
Yeah.
So Harry, can you give me like average reason for why a company may have been denied?
Oh, denied. The biggest reason was, and this is primarily because of federal guidelines, they had to document a loss of revenue. Basically, this money is to help businesses that experience some kind of a loss of revenue because of COVID-19. And so for different reasons, sometimes companies just didn't have the documentation. You know, a lot of these small businesses, they don't have accountants, they don't have a big staff, and it's really hard for them to document some of this. So in this next round, if there is a second round, we're trying to figure out a way to reduce the documentation as much as possible, but still staying within federal guidelines. You know, we work with small businesses all the time, so we have a lot of empathy for them. We understand their needs and that a lot of them are struggling. So I would say that was the number one reason, you know, just providing documentation for some of the guidelines.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much.
So would it be your recommendation then, Harry, that we do, I know I'm getting out, as Jeff would say, a little about out above my skis or ahead of my skis, but, you know, if as far as the second round goes, I know you're not finished and I'm not trying to put any pressure on. However, since we've got you on the line, would be interested to know your opinion about a second round. And is there still a demand in the community that has gone unmet because of the way this was structured? And would it be worthwhile to go out with another round?
Well, it's a good question. We were a little shocked that larger companies didn't apply for this because it didn't exclude larger companies. It just made sure that smaller ones were able to apply. So I was really shocked that there were only about 20 companies out of the original 453 that had more than 10 employees. So I don't know if the word needs to get out to those types of companies. We're also thinking that maybe a lot of those companies got the PPP or the disaster loans. So maybe they just, another thought is that, you know, now with the reopenings happening over the last couple of weeks, maybe some businesses are just so focused on reopening that they're not really interested in applying for a grant, that maybe, you know, they figure their revenues will be able to, you know, bring in $10,000 pretty easily once they reopen. But it's a good question. We were surprised there weren't more applications. So is there a more need? Probably, but we'll have to try to figure out how to get more businesses aware of it. I think we did a really good job of broadcasting it. We worked really closely with the county, and it was on the news, on radio programs. It was in Business Courier. It was in the Inquirer. It was, you know, we got out to all the chambers. We don't know why more people didn't apply for it, but you know, we'll do our analysis at the end here and make a recommendation, and we're happy to try to do another round if the commissioners feel like it's needed.
Thank you. Well, anecdotally, and I'm sure the other commissioners heard from folks too. I did hear quite a bit of, well, we got, you know, $1,000 in PPP. Is that disqualifying? And the answer is yes. And so they didn't bother to apply. I got a number of those folks. I think we all heard from people who didn't qualify for one reason or the other, but that one, I think, was one of the top reasons that I told people they didn't qualify.
And Commissioner Greenhouse, one thing we are looking at is, and we would probably need to run this by the prosecutor's office, is it possible? So there's the difference between people who got a PPP cash advance versus an actual loan. And so a lot of those cash advances were only like $1,000 or $2,000, and so those companies really didn't benefit that much from the PPP.
Right.
If we're able to, maybe there's a way of saying if you just got a cash advance of a certain amount, you can't apply for this still. But the ones who got the big PPP loans, we're a little more scared of those ones because there's a thing called duplication of benefits. You can't use two different federal sources to pay for the same thing, so we have to just be careful.
Oh yeah, no, I totally agree. No, the guy I talked to, one of them at least, got like $1,000. So I asked if he could turn it back in so that he could apply for $10,000. And I'm like, yeah, not right now. So you know, but anyway, all right. Well, I'm glad you're open to the idea of maybe learning from this experience and trying to figure out, you know, maybe even a smaller tranche to go out with what we've learned. So. All right, very good. Anything else from the commissioners?
I have nothing.
Nothing. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, thank you all for jumping on. That was a great update.
Thank you,
Yes. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you.
All right. Jeff, I have nothing else on the agenda. Is there anything else?
Nothing else today, Madam President. I think that concludes our business today.
All right, very good. So we have a meeting on Thursday, our regular meeting. And so everyone should have received the agenda for that. So with that, I'm going to move that we adjourn.
Second.
Commissioner Dreehouse?
Yes.
Commissioner Summer